This presentation describes additional work done to define the role of the choroid in RNFL loss and assumes familiarity with the main study when activity trumps IOP, which described the strong quantitative relationship between strenuous activity and RNFL loss for the study subject with normal tension glaucoma. As you'll see, there were many good reasons to suspect the choroid had a role to play, but it was challenging to see past the normal fluctuations in choroid thickness to determine whether the choroid truly needed to be considered as a factor in this subject's RNFL loss. This and related presentations are available at our central links site in the form of videos, Google Slides, or printable PDFs. When viewing in Google Slides, the home link icon on later slides will take you back to this content slide. We begin with the reasons why the choroid was a suspect in RNFL loss, followed by a review of the major factors affecting choroid thickness and their possible association with RNFL loss. So why consider the choroid as a suspect in RNFL loss? First, the choroid thins dramatically with age, losing up to half its thickness between the ages of 20 and 80, while at the same time glaucoma risk increases, making it reasonable to wonder if the physical connection between choroid, RPE, photoreceptors, nerve fiber, and optic nerve head plays a role in RNFL loss with aging. Second, this subject's extensive peripapillary atrophy with choroid thinning is known to be associated with glaucoma risk. Third, in this subject, we witnessed instances of choroid thickening with choroidal fluid influx to the retina and subsequent RNFL loss. And fourth, in this subject, we also witnessed instances of choroid thinning in response to strenuous activity with subsequent RNFL loss. So did changes to choroid thickness have a role to play in RNFL loss? A 10-month study of diurnal choroid thickness was undertaken to determine normal choroid behavior. Precise measurements of choroid depth were taken 4 times per day at 10 locations, 5 locations per eye, in line with the same sectors monitored for RNFL loss. In general, choroid thickness changes occurred in concert across both eyes. In other words, there was no specific choroid location that behaved differently or out of sync with any other choroid location. Also note that we did not determine conclusively whether the 10 micrometer difference you'll see between right eye and left eye mean choroid thickness was due to a systematic difference, with the left eye's lower choroid thickness reflecting greater RNFL loss, or whether that difference was more an artifact of site selection. In agreement with reports by others, mean choroid thickness varied diurnally, in this case falling about 8% over 12 hours, or about 0.65% per hour, from early morning highs to late afternoon lows. Surprisingly, choroid thickness was often suppressed by strenuous activity, especially strenuous activity clusters, which we'll discuss in a later slide. Choroid thickness was also a function of ambient temperature, thickening during winter months and thinning during summer months. And finally, choroid thickness was a function of IOP, as reported by others, in this case showing a significant thickening with IOP reduction after switching from brimonidine timolol to latanoprost drops. Thus, choroid thickness fluctuates with a variety of everyday factors, which must be accounted for when looking for associations between choroid thickness and RNFL loss. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the reasons previously given for thinking that the choroid had a role to play in RNFL loss, beginning with aging. Normal choroid thinning with age, up to 50% reduction between ages 20 and 80, along with the choroid's essential role in supplying nutrients to the outer retina and optic nerve head, begs the question whether this thinning has some connection to rising glaucoma risk and RNFL loss with age. For this subject, prior to 2018, few OCTs were available. Also, many historical OCTs were not performed with enhanced depth imaging or didn't include the choroidal areas of interest. Therefore, to study the effects of aging, we first focused on a single sector, R8, with measurements available for the entire decade, adjusted for diurnal variation, and with a significant RNFL loss. Choroidal thickness began the decade near the low end of what was expected for the subject's age and sex with moderate myopia, and fell at a rate of 2% per year near the maximum of the expected range of about 1 to 2% per year for this age range. The 2% per year rate was later confirmed with close monitoring of mean bilateral choroid thickness for the years 2023 to 24. Year-to-year choroidal thinning was not associated with the yearly variations in RNFL loss driven by strenuous activity. However, if the choroid thickness changes were not a primary cause of recent RNFL loss, it may still be that long-term choroid thinning has played a role in increasing susceptibility to RNFL loss from strenuous activity and other factors. Next, we'll examine the finding that first got us interested in looking more closely at the choroid. This involved occasional expansion of choroid thickness near the outer edge of the periparpally atrophy, with accompanying movement of fluid from the choroid into the retina, choroidal fluid influx, through Brooks membrane breaks, and associated RNFL loss, suggesting that surges in choroid thickness with choroidal fluid influx, like laminar fluid influx, might be tied to RNFL loss. However, it was found that such choroid thickening only occurs in the left eye in a narrow band at the periparpally atrophy border, and that these surges, unlike strenuous activity time, are not consistently associated with later RNFL loss. Moreover, we're not aware of evidence that small amounts of interstitial choroidal fluid are toxic to the retina or optic nerve head, with such fluids likely moving back and forth across border breaks with diurnal changes in pressure gradients. And even if the source of such fluid was toxic, such as near L3C1, it would be diluted by the choroid before reaching the retina through Brooks membrane breaks. Thus, strenuous activity remained the most consistent explanation for RNFL loss in both eyes at all sectors, including sectors with choroidal fluid influx. Finally, as noted earlier, choroid thickness was often suppressed by strenuous activity, especially strenuous activity clusters, as shown here for strenuous activity cluster I. In other words, the choroid often remembers being suppressed on previous days, with suppression becoming more profound as after a cluster of such days, and suggesting that choroid thickness suppression might be directly connected to RNFL loss. However, unlike strenuous activity time, there was not a consistent or quantifiable relationship between such choroid thickness suppression and RNFL loss, with many cases of brief choroid thickness suppression having no effect on RNFL, and other cases of RNFL loss after highly strenuous activity, but without obvious choroid thickness suppression. So again, strenuous activity remained the most consistent explanation for RNFL loss, with choroid thickness suppression being at best like fluid influx, a confirmation of conditions for RNFL loss. In other words, seeing choroid thickness suppressed may indicate that recent activity has been excessive, but it won't catch all types of risky behavior, nor allow estimation of risk magnitude. In conclusion, for this subject, precise measurements from thousands of OCT scans taken over many months and years showed that strenuous activity trumped choroid thickness as a predictor of RNFL loss, with the caveat that choroid thickness suppression from strenuous activity, like fluid influx, may sometimes be useful in confirming conditions for RNFL loss. It's also possible that long-term choroid thinning as part of the aging process increases susceptibility to RNFL loss from strenuous activity and other factors.